I'm looking at the reports, and the African Union has suspended Guinea after the military coup. You know that this comes after the military arrested Guinea's president Alpha Conde and dissolved the country's constitution. I'm going to say this, and I'm going to say it with a lot of confidence, that AU, the African Union, is one of the most useless organizations in Africa. Sometimes you wonder, what is the purpose of the African Union? Is it for the good of the Africans or African as a continent, or it's an organization that was put in place to facilitate dictators? Just think about it. But even before I go ahead, let's look at a list of the former African Union presidents or chairperson. I won't name all of them, but I'll mention a few. 2009 to 2010, the late Muammar Gaddafi. 2016 to 2017, Idriss Déby, the former president of Chad. He came to power in 1990 and he was president until the 20th of April 2021 when he was killed. He died in office. Déby also violated the Chad constitution when he eliminated term limits, and after eliminating the term limits, he won in 2006, 2011, 2016, even in 2021. He was killed in office. Typical dictator. 2018-2019, Paul Kagame of Rwanda. 2017 to 2018, Alpha Conde, the same man that we are talking about, a dictator himself. So what do you expect from the African Union? Is it an organization that facilitates dictators to stay in power, or it's an organization that was put in place for good of the African people or for good of the African continent? Why, when dictators are violating rights of Africans, the same organization never says anything? Nothing at all. But when the military takes over, they come immediately, they condemn and they suspend. And so what if they suspend Guinea from the African Union? But why don't they come up and speak when these dictators are violating rights of people? The African Union is concentrating more on effects rather than the cause. The AU has always been very quiet on actions when the reigning dictators are violating their country's constitutions, but they always come up very fast when the dictators are fallen. I don't agree with military coups. No, don't get me wrong, I do not agree with military coups. Military coups are as bad as civilian coups, but the EU has to understand that when these old men change the constitutions to make the presidency a lifetime job, they should come up and talk. They should come up and condemn when these dictators turn presidency into a lifetime job. They never say anything. They never suspend these leaders when they rip the constitutions to stay in power for life, as long as the AU keep on keeping quiet on these old dictators that have brought all sorts of problems in Africa. Military coups won't stop. Shame upon the African Union. Shame upon you. It is a disgrace in Africa. It is a disgrace to you, the African Union, to suspend Guinea. When this dictator was killing people, was violating the constitution, you said nothing. Alpha Conde came in power in December 2010. He took power under a constitution that provided for term limits, 2 5-year terms. In March 2020, Alpha Conde pushed through a constitutional amendment that would enable him run for a controversial third term. He brought in an amendment to provide for 6-year 2 terms and claimed that this was a new constitutional order and therefore he was eligible to run for another term. The AU was quiet. The people of Guinea took to the streets to protest against the illegal amendments. Dozens of people in Guinea were killed by the security forces in the violent protests. Later, 2 opposition leaders were sentenced to 1 year in jail for leading the protests. The third one of the opposition leader died in a pre-trial detention. The election itself was a fraud. Social media was switched off. Same things that happened in Uganda, where I come from. The AU has never condemned anything in Uganda. Even when over 50 people were killed, when the opposition leader Robert Kyagulanyi Ssentamu was arrested, AU never said anything. Opposition activists were detained. There was massive ballot stuffing. Election observers were obstructed. The AU was quiet. And finally, Alpha Conde declared himself the duly elected president with 59.5% of the vote. Of course, the opposition leaders went to the country's constitutional court challenging Alpha Conde's alleged victory, citing very many irregularities. On 7th November 2020, the constitutional court dismissed the case and held that Alpha Conde was rightfully elected, and he was sworn in on 15th December 2020 amidst heavy security presence across the country. People were killed. Many people were killed during the violent protests challenging the constitutional amendment, AU was quiet. When the opposition leader died in pre-trial detention, the AU was quiet. Today, when the military takes over, they are the first people to come up and challenge or unsuspend Guinea. People in Africa are suffering because of these constitutional amendments, removing term limits. You look at all dictators in Africa, they have all violated the constitution, their country's constitution. The AU is quiet. But like I said, you look at the former leaders or the chairpersons of the AU itself. When you look at the list, there are some dictators on the list also. So the question should be, was the AU formed to protect the Africans, the continent, on the good of the Africans, or it was formed so that they take loads and loads of money and protect dictators in power? Take an example in Uganda. What Gen. Museveni is doing, constitution amended, no term limits. He can be president for life. Age limit amended, against the will of the people. Political prisoners, political opponents are the biggest number in prisons in Uganda, and then something happens tomorrow and then the AU will come very fast and condemn the military if that's to happen. Why don't they condemn also the acts of dictators before they fall? Like I said in the beginning, AU, unless they change and they start caring about Africans and the African continent, AU is the most useless organization on the continent.